Hi there, I'm Thomas, founder of CX Planner, the easy, practical, and super fast commissioning platform. Here are two highlights from our platform. The first one is goodbye to Excel, pen and paper, and hello to CX Planner. One of our core utilities is to convert everything from spreadsheet into our CX Planner format in just a matter of minutes. The second one is our practical design. CX Planner works on every device, but most importantly, your subcontractor will love the interface too. If you could be interested in hearing more, then book a free meeting, sign up to our newsletter, or get access to our book on our website. I'm looking forward to seeing you.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Cassie with AABC. I'd like to welcome you to today's Tab Talk webinar and thank our sponsor, CX Planner, for supporting this session. Just a few items to cover before we get started. Presenters will hold questions until the end of the presentation, but we encourage you to submit them at any time using the Q&A button. If you happen to experience technical problems during the webinar, please use the chat function to inform the panelists, and our producer, William, will assist you. This presentation is being recorded and will be available for viewing in 1 week. In terms of continuing education credit, everyone in attendance for the full webinar will receive a certificate of attendance sent to their email within 24 hours. If you are a certified TVE or TBT with AABC, your CEUs for attending any webinar in this series will be automatically uploaded to your member portal after the webinar. Today's webinar is Preventive Medicine, Commissioning for a Healthy and Safe Building with Joe Hardy of Augusta Air Balance Company and Mike Kelly of American Testing, Inc. Joe Hardy has been in mechanical construction for 50 years and in the testing, adjusting, and balancing business for 20 years. He is a certified AABC TBE and works at Augusta Air Balance Company. Mike Kelly's testing and balancing career began at 14 years old, working weekends and summers for the family business at ATI when it started in 1984. Immediately out of high school, he attended the training and schooling at the Baltimore Local Union TAB apprenticeship program, where his father and uncle taught TAB for 15 years. By the time he was 22, he was certified in TAB and spent his first 20 years in the field performing TAB and mentoring many technicians. He has spent the past 20 years since then as vice president and president of ATI. He is a certified AABC test and balance engineer and ACG certified CX agent, served on the AABC board of directors for 12 years, and is currently serving on the AABC Fume Hood Certification Committee. Without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Mike and Joe to kick us off.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Cassie, for that introduction. Welcome, Joe. It's good to see you today.
Always good to see you, Mike.
Yes, indeed. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending today's TAB Talk seminar for the AABC. The topic of today's webinar will be preventative or preventive medicine. Apparently, those are the same words, which I didn't know when we put this together. But now we know something, learned already. Commissioning for a healthy and safe building. I should probably screen share. And we'll go with this. All right, I think we're all good here. This course or this webinar today is going to describe various phases of the commissioning process through design, construction, startup, and final occupancy. We'll review what projects, construction team, commissioning agent, TAB, contractors, mechanical, electrical, engineers, and architects, all those in the team might look for during those times of basic construction and or renovations. Recommendations and or requirements from the various entities governing health and safety of buildings. A lot of times during construction and or renovations, we're all worried about the healthy and safe building post occupancy. And I think what we're going to touch on today is various health and safety issues as you go through construction, as well as post and occupancy. You know, everything kind of runs hand in hand. we're going to talk about recommendations and requirements for various entities governing health and safe buildings, which will be included as well, issues surrounding the transmission and short-term and long-term effects of exposure to various atmospheric contaminants, such as we all have this viruses that we just are going through and we still are seeing essentially day to day. It probably comes up in our talk, and then molds, pollen, dust, smoke, and VOCs. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Joe here for a little, I guess, backstory, Joe, on how this kind of all came to fruition and how we came upon developing this topic.
Yeah, I think like many people, up until COVID introduced itself into our environment, not many people really worried too much about what air they were breathing, and either in the workplace or when you went shopping or went to church. So COVID kind of brought that to my mind, and of course, a lot of actions were taken back then. There was a big learning curve for all of us as to filtration, air cleaning, how the transfer of viruses and other things affected us, how they were carried through the atmosphere inside. I can remember some of the warnings said that you had to stay across the aisle from someone in the grocery store even. So that just spurred my curiosity, and I helped out at our church. We have a sizable church down here in the South, and we were wanting to try to stay open and mitigate the spread of this disease. So we took some actions. I wrote an article about that for the Tab Journal, and the thing that really brought it to me, though, I have a couple who are my friends, have been my wife and my friends ever since we both got married. They're like family to us. About 12 years ago, they decided they were going to prepare for retirement and built a small, what they considered a smaller home, a 3,200 square foot home, which is what we call in our part of the country an envelope house. It's very efficient. It has the spray-in foam in all of the walls, all of the floors. So basically, they live in a refrigerator. During the process of the construction, no thought was given to either make up air from the outside or energy recovery ventilators or anything. So basically, after the building was built, they moved right in. And over the period of about 6 years, they lived within that environment. The only change of air they got was when the doors were open and closed. Well, about 6 years ago, they both started experiencing issues. The husband developed lymphoma and some lung problems. The wife started developing kidney issues and liver issues. Ever since that time, for the past 6 years, they've been being treated for these maladies. And it just comes down to a point of they were living in an environment that never changed. I ran a test in their house, I guess back around Christmas or so now, and all of the numbers were off the charts for the CO2 and VOCs and everything. So since then, we have started a process. We bought some air cleaners for them and things, and we're seeing how that works out. But anyway, that's how I got seriously interested in VOCs and how important it is for your lived-in environment to be free of these, as well as the allergens and what have you that are in our environment. So I hope today that Mike and I will share with you our experiences and some suggestions as to how we can watch out for all of this as we're going through the commissioning process and construction process, and even a little bit about after occupancy. But anyway, can we go on to the next slide there, Michael?
I want to add two things, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
And this has been since, I believe, I don't know that I mentioned this last time, but last AABC convention, the speaker there, Ashray, representative, I think it was the president, he or she, they were talking about the, I guess, objectives of ASHRAE moving forward, and some of their mantra now is safe and healthy buildings. We're all always hearing about low carbon footprint, low energy, but it seems like maybe somewhere along the line, safe and healthy became a sidebar to what we were all worried about was the dollar and the energy and carbon footprint. And we start throwing safe and healthy out, or using it as a sidebar where we should be putting it forefront and mitigating any problems. Like, I'm sorry to hear about your friends, but the second thing I wanted to say was the EPA years ago built a building. I believe it was in Philadelphia. I might be wrong. And maybe a lot of people know this, but it dawned on me. I remember hearing this EPA building was built, and they put brand new, modular furniture in, new carpeting, and all the people moved into the building, and they were so happy with this great new place. But then they started having an abundance of people taking off work once or twice a week, abundance of people saying they didn't feel well in the building, what's going on. And water cooler talk was, oh my God, this place is so nice, but it makes me feel horrible. This place is miserable. Well, apparently they didn't have enough outside air at the EPA building, right? The Environmental Protection Agency didn't have the right kind of ventilation in the building, and their own employees, workers, the team was ill over this brand new building, and they had to start flushing and purging the building. And eventually, as those VOCs wore off, not to mention any viruses or allergens that were being cross-contaminated throughout. So thought that was always something to put in. You don't hear about it a lot, but when you're like, you hear that old war story, you're like, oh yeah, well. So at the end of this course, we're hoping everybody will, not just COVID, will understand the processes and intents of mitigating disease spread, not just COVID, environmental systems and how they're frontline to controlling VOCs and allergens. And Joe, you brought this up before that I had experienced last year, I believe, because of the fires from Canada. Came down, and I was driving one day, and I said, wow, it's foggy in the middle of the day. I was going from Delaware to Maryland, and I was like, why is there so much fog at 12 o'clock in the afternoon? And of course, I listen to radio, but I don't listen to radio that has news updates. It's just music. And finally, when I got home, I turned the TV on, and they're like, oh yeah, there's smoke coming from Canada. I was like, how in the world is smoke all the way down here? And then you had explained how there was smoke coming down from I guess Canada, up in Washington State where your daughter had lived. So
yeah, my daughter does live in Washington.
Yeah,
my daughter does live in Washington State, and I think the thing I heard from her, of course, she's in the healthcare industry and works in a hospital out in the Pacific Northwest. And I asked her specifically, I said, well, what do you do when the wildfire smoke is so thick out there? And it does get very thick. And so she asked her maintenance manager at the hospital what they did to try to mitigate that. And he said, well, we just turn off the outside air on everything. And I thought, well, what does that do? Oh, of course, problem solved. Doesn't keep the smell out, doesn't keep all the particulates out, and plus you mess up all of your pressurization in your building and pressure relationships. So, I don't think that's the true answer that we want to look for today. No. And try to figure out some other ways to go.
And then number 3 and 4 there, I think everybody's read through that. Minimizing exposure during construction and acceptance testing, and then principles behind the building flush and beyond initial building acceptance.
We're always encountering things in our lives and in our houses and workplace and everywhere else that are not good for us. So
moving on to the next slide, we're going to talk about what are we mitigating, and I'll let you go with that, Joe.
Yeah, there's no need to talk about mitigating something unless you know what you're mitigating. All of us have allergies. I don't know of many people who don't have some kind of allergy to something. Whether it's down here, we have a lot of pollens, we have a lot of dust, and just this morning on the way to into the project, we ran through some wildfire smoke, So all of these things, viruses and bacteria, of course, we were worried about, particularly back during COVID. VOCs, which are volatile organic compounds, those are things that have very low vapor pressures, and we smell them all the time, cleaning products, everything else. Molds are a particular problem, and we'll get into those in the construction process and the design process a little bit. And then bioaerosols. You don't see them, but they're there, and they can have a tremendous effect on how you breathe, how you feel, and how you live.
Sounds good.
Looking at the little chart on the right, well, too late. You can
Oh,
go
I can
back.
go back.
Okay, go back, Mike. The little chart on the right, of course, it's got asthma in the middle is the main, something that causes problems with asthma, but viruses and bacteria particularly, and fungi, don't really think about fungus being in your breathing air, but even outside, you have your molds and your mildews and your little things that put off spores that you can breathe in, and it can give your lungs quite a problem.
Yeah, I often tell this story that too many people have, reactive immediate problems to funguses or viruses or bacteria. And we had a employee years ago that was working in a monkey vivarium, and long about the third month of working in there and setting pressures back and forth, in and out over the months, he was very ill, and he went to the doctor, and he basically thought, well, I've got the bad, whatever it is, I got it, because he had bed sweats, he had and it wasn't allergies because he was taking stuff, wasn't hitting it. And he said, yeah, I'm really tired. I got up early. I had to get into the vivarium this morning, and the monkeys were crazy. And the doctor looked at him and said, what do you mean the monkeys were crazy? Where do you work? Oh, I work around rhesus monkeys and that. So happened that this doctor had some experience with mycoplasma and something that, I guess, a dander from monkeys. And I got a phone call from my employee, and he said, Mike, I love working for you, but if I have to go back to the monkey places, I'm going to be working somewhere else. So that ended the monkey. But, other people have never had problems with it. And some people have problems around, whatever animals they are. I know my daughter is very, we didn't know why for years. She had terrible, it's that time of year with asthma and change of seasons, and come to find out, she went to the doctor and found out that her allergies and allergens were dog related, and we're a huge dog family. So unfortunately, we tortured her all of her younger years.
Well, my daughter's the same way. She's allergic to peanuts, deathly allergic to peanuts. And that's something that's, you don't even know if you're eating a cookie that has some kind of peanut product in it, or was cooked at a factory that had peanuts in it. So she has to be very careful.
I'll work on to the next slide here. What's the problem and why mitigate? As we know, nothing is 100% effective. When you do any of this mitigation, they can be very, very effective, but maybe not 100% effective. Disease spread affects all occupants. That could be, someone just shows up, a delivery guy, and happened to be on the job site to deliver whatever they're delivering, and it affects everyone. So control is one of the greatest avenues to take. Bacteria, viruses are not all there is to worry about. We have to worry about many other things. Sometimes we get narrow-minded and thinking we just have to worry about the spread of the flu, but there's other things out there, like for instance, my daughter had pink eye here a couple of weeks ago from college, and that became a please don't come home.
Right.
Allergy season is upon us. We all have those to some extent anymore. I know when I was a child, they said you're allergic to pollen, and everybody in my neighborhood was like, well, there's a weird kid, he's allergic to pollen. And now everyone's allergic to pollen. So and those wildfire things that we talked about, clean workspaces. What's a VOC? So VOCs are off-gassing of the chemicals, and like that new car smell, the new paint smell, Your new appliances, when you open them up, you're like, wow, the oven smells brand new, or the microwave or the refrigerator. You know, that waft that hits you in the face when you open the refrigerator? Long-term exposure, it's very bad for you. And we love the new car smell, you know, but the good thing is we're only in it an hour a day. But that can be to some people that may or may not be hypersensitive. That might be very, you know, inconvenient and you know, affecting. So knowing where those VOCs can come from and what can affect it, you don't think, well, my new Lazy Boy at home is perfect. I sit in it every night for 4 or 5 hours and watch TV, and then I go to bed, and you know, I may crash in it for an hour and then go to bed. Well, you sitting there in that smell for hours is not good. Now, relaying all that to workspaces, you know, we go in and we have brand new tools. We have brand new everything showing up on a new job site that's new, and it's off-gassing all the time with a VOC. So,
Well, some of the things that, well, the easiest determinant of whether you're being exposed is your eyes. Your eyes typically will start watering or itching, and your nose may start running, or it may stop up. So our bodies tell us when we're being exposed to these things, and it's not just during construction, or it's after occupancy too, unfortunately.
Yeah, here we were explaining what are we looking for in VOCs. Like I said, they're gases from certain solids or liquids. It's a variety of things. Again, your health is going to tell you where you are on that chain of reactions, and you know, maybe how tolerant you are to whatever concentration there is. And you know, some people may not speak up, but it could be up to 10 times higher indoors than outdoors, because of course it's solution to pollution is dilution. If it's a diluted VOC outdoors, may not be as harmful as it being indoors. They can lead to ENT, intermittent or chronic irritations, headaches, loss of concentration, coordination, nausea, possible damage to your liver, kidneys, or central nervous system. Some VOCs are actually considered carcinogens, which we all know is a very bad word. And we see these pictures at the bottom where you have an empty classroom or a seminar room to the left, and then the same room with all those people in it. Now we've brought in laptops, papers, clothing, other people's, you know, whether they're wearing some kind of perfume or whatever, those all can be hazardous to them. So care and concern should be taken. What are we looking for? Do you want to go with that, Joe?
Well, particulates they're easy. Particulates tend to collect on surfaces. They're not as hard to determine a problem, that you have a problem, as are the VOCs, because they're heavier. And the filtration we have will catch the majority of them. They're very small, smaller than a human hair. But, you know, just like dust on any surface, you don't know what's in that dust. Many times we in the test and balance industry end up dealing with belt dust off of equipment being transferred through the system, and it shows up on the ceilings and on the grills and on surfaces around. Many times people think that's mold or mildew.
Yeah.
When it's just belt dust, but sometimes it can be mold and mildew showing up in those places. So we have to be very careful about it. Yeah, and I think we may get into the air distribution and air pathways in a little bit, but we have to be very careful about that. I think many times about open offices, I see a lot of open offices anymore, and how easy it is in an open office for someone to sneeze or cough, or you know, you vacuum and all of this dust is in the air, and it can travel a long way before it ever falls out. And so we have to be very careful of those things. In our workplace, it would be tough. So in the design phases, like Mike was saying, on the design team, of course, you've got your architects, your engineers, your owners. Most of the time, the TAB does not get involved in the design. I wish we did. And I think many times the commissioning group does not get involved in the design, and I wish they did. Some of these things may be maybe headed off before they become a problem. But something as important as the project specifications, you need to pay attention to what products are specified during the process of deciding what the owner wants, what his project objectives are, what type of building is it? Is it a hospital? Is it an educational institution, shopping center? All of that kind of feeds into my thinking into how you actually build your specifications and to what projects you want on, or what products you want installed on that project. I can remember years ago when I was actually out in the field on construction projects, they had, particularly in hospitals and other places, they had paints that were just horrible to smell. And there were guys in there applying them with no masks, no anything. And I wonder, what effect that had on their bodies day after day after day, working in the epoxy. And I'm sure some of them ended up developing some problems that I never heard of, but that affected their families greatly. Air patterns, that kind of deals with how whether you have open spaces or individual offices, which way is that going to take? How are you transferring air from one place to another? Is there a return on one end of the room that all of the air from the room is going to go across that room to that return, which means that if a person sneezes over here, those virus components are traveling through the air and can hit many people along the way, even though they may be getting diluted along the way. You never know how sensitive someone might be to picking up the sickness that's there. Pathways, again, are the duct system. How is your air being distributed to each spot? How is it being returned from that spot? Where are the terminals located? Are they large enough? Are they too small? Are we generating a situation where we may create a problem with mold spores growing in the ductwork? All kinds of things like that, I think, have to be taken into account. What are your sources? Your air moving equipment, what type is it? I've noticed, in fact, I got called last week to a restaurant who was having problems with condensation because they had added in some of the little ductless systems, and they didn't have enough outdoor air to help mitigate that. And anyway, it's causing a problem for them. I've got to go look at it. So what methods of mitigation are we using? What kind of filtration? What are our outdoor air conditions that we're going to have to worry about? Or are there outdoor air conditions we need to worry about? Is there a plant nearby that's going to, the odors from it, due to prevailing winds, are going to draft the discharge from the plant over that might cause somebody problems? How many air changes are you going to have? Are there enough? Are there too many? How is all of this going to be controlled? And what level of filtration do you need on your outside air and your return air, particularly outside air if you're dealing with smoke? Are you going to deal with smoke? Is it something that's going to be a problem for you? And intake and discharge locations, of course, for labs, discharge locations are important. But I had a job a few years ago. In fact, two jobs. One of them, both were schools. One of them had a problem where the plumbing vent, even though it was located code-wise the right distance from the outside air intake on a rooftop unit, the prevailing wind pushed the odor, and they actually could smell it inside from that unit. And then another one, there was a high school. We were in there actually testing and balancing the building. They were running a practice run with the buses. And just so happened the bus was parked, and the bus parking was designed to be right where the outdoor air intake for the unit was, to the space where we were. And we started having our eyes watering and smelling the bus fumes and wondering what in the world was going on. So things like that, that just minor things that look minor to begin with, but they can end up being a major change later on once you actually start occupying the building, operating your process.
You know, you say that prevailing winds thing, and that sparked on a job years ago that, yeah, we were on the roof. It was a large, university pharmacy building. I won't say where and when, but it was a university, and didn't even think about it. And once we got into the job, we started smelling, and I was like, why is that smell coming from? I know it's coming from that exhaust fan. A building over was another building on campus. And I was like, how's that getting in this building? And then we went up on the roof, and I looked over, and I was like, and I looked at the maintenance guy we were with, and I said, does he usually blow, like, what's the wind? Does it usually blow this way from over there? Oh yeah, most of the time the wind comes from the south here, comes up the water, And I was like, well, daggone, that's probably what's going on here, is the prevailing wind usually coming from that direction these days. And sure enough, we were like, yeah, we can't control that. Like now we're just gonna have to deal with it somehow, some way. I believe at the end of the day, they started putting charcoal filters on some of the intakes, or some of the equipment that was from the intakes. But yeah, you don't think about it. And, sometimes I guess when they build these buildings, they're at, hey, that is what it is. We got to put the building here. I don't know what else we can do. But
yeah, you always know where the paper mills are.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. All right, moving on to the construction phase.
Well, of course, OSHA has their requirements for, and they're more strict now than they were regarding safety of the workers on the job sites, filtration, then you have to have a respirator, what have you. But I think it's important that just because there's a product specified for use, I think we all know that substitutions are made in the process of a project. And if a replacement or substitution is used, does it adhere not only to the basic requirements of the initial intent, but are they safe? Are they going to gas off later? Are they going to gas off in the process of the project and cause problems for the workers? And particularly for the commissioning agent, they get involved a whole lot earlier than we do most of the time. So that would be one of the things they would check on a submittal review. And also on walkthrough tests, if you do your walkthrough inspections, to be sure that products are being used properly. I know we might be stepping on the toes of the safety people on the job, but nonetheless, I think it's inherent upon commissioning agents and the tab people to watch out for these. Documentation that your testing that's required in the specifications is actually done. Duct pressure tests that are required, particularly, and just make sure that all of this is documented and kept record of and followed up upon. I know from a tab standpoint, one of our biggest problems is that people don't follow up on the deficiency reports that we give. And I don't know about the commissioning agents. I'm sure the commissioning agents have trouble the same way. That's something that just has to be done in the field, and we have to be sure that it's done. We have to confirm that low VOCs paints are used, and anything that's going to produce particulates is taken care of and done properly. Excuse me. Any dust production, I think we all know that during the process of a project, you've got, particularly if there's sheetrock involved, there's going to be dust involved. And I know it's very difficult to have construction workers wear particle masks. But by the same token, I think we would all understand that production is probably increased and improved, and absenteeism from the job site is probably reduced should the required filtration be used, personal protection devices be used on the project while we're going along. Again, pay attention to the paints, the epoxies, the wall coverings, the carpeting, the furniture. All all of this is VOC producing. And I guess we'll get into the flushing part of it in a little while, Mike, but I think it's inherent upon us with another set of eyes and another set of noses and lungs to let people know when there's a possibility that there's a problem.
You know, that is exactly what it's all about, is awareness. And, you know, we can't force anyone. We're not the police. But again, that's why from TAB people as ourselves to create this webinar and talk about this, it's the awareness of it, just to be, you know, we can control the airflow or test it, adjust it, and balance it. But at the end of the day, how do we mitigate? How do you long-term, how do you during the project use that equipment to make sure you control your VOCs, dilute them, particulates, you know, all that stuff. And then, you know, again, it's the awareness and then the execution of how do we mitigate, how do we at least address the situations. I think is this something you came up with or you found, Joe?
Yeah, there was an article in ASHRAE magazine. And the final conclusion was, and it was about air cleaners and about safe working environment. And it was written by Kathleen Owen and Linda D. Lee, who are credited there. And they concluded that air cleaners can offer a safe, simple, and cost-effective alternative to main HVAC renovation and modification. This builds in flexibility and empowers the building manager to cost-effectively and safely manage building operation, reducing the risk of community spread of respiratory viruses. Of course, like you said a while ago, filtration is not the only thing. That's not the only thing we can do. They make air cleaners that are specific for different VOCs and different things in the environment, the breathed environment. And that's getting back to my friend and his wife. That's exactly what we're doing for them now. We're in the process of, we have installed the air cleaners in his house. We didn't install them. He bought them and put them in himself. He's sitting in his rooms. And the thought behind it was that we're not going to cure him with air cleaners.
Right.
However, his house is not built to where he has enough fresh air, and that's going to be something else he's going to have installed is a energy recovery unit. But all of the treatments he's going through and she is going through, I think, can be more effective if the air they breathe and the environment they live in is cleaner.
You know, when my father built his retirement rancher, he was going to go with the urethane, and you know, that basically, like you said, lives in a refrigerator, makes it really tight, more energy efficient, economical. You know, my heating and cooling costs are going to be down, hopefully. You know, it's more economical. Here I am in a retirement home, like my father, your friends, and they had to do a blower door test on the house because the code in the county which he was in is very tight on, you have to have a tight house, you know, no leakage, got to meet the green building standard, whatever it was. And they ended up, apparently the code in his county was you put in an exhaust fan switch in your bathroom that times out. And I think it's a timed switch of 30 minutes, 45 or an hour. I might be wrong on that, but it's that choice. So every 30 minutes, the exhaust fan would come on and run for 15 minutes, or every hour it would come on and run for 20 minutes or 15. And the theory behind it is it'll purge the house of the VOCs and the carbon dioxide. But my point of view is, if you have an exhaust fan in a home that's really tight, where's it getting its air from?
Yeah, you can't.
We're exhausting out of the house. Yeah. We got to bring air in. So it was. So you're suggesting that we just infiltrate the air through whatever other cracks that the blower door test didn't reveal. So
right.
Air cleaning and purifying devices, like you had said, we've got duct mounted, wall mounted, freestanding. The UV lights help eliminate impurities in the air and lessen odors. Ion generators help eliminate microparticles, particulates like smoke, using electricity to charge a needle point that is capable to strip electrons from molecules. We see them from time to time in healthcare facilities. HEPA and MERV eliminate particles through pleated air filtration methods, electrostatic. I don't see a lot of that in the, I don't know about you, but I don't see much of that in the commercial business.
No.
And then down at the bottom, we've actually listed what MERV means, minimum efficiency reporting value, and HEPA is high efficiency particulate air filter. So those being the points that you could use to mitigate and help clean and purify. The ion generators help eliminate. I know they were super popular, I believe, coming out of COVID, and they've kind of died off as far as I can tell, but I do believe they work. I've seen some research on them. I've seen some articles, and kind of cool stuff. Very, very ingenious technology, I think, and it's gotten to the point where it's somewhat economical.
Well, it's something too you need to look at back again during the design process and what have you, to see if it's something that can be applied or is needed in a particular building. So just another checkpoint. That's all.
Exposure control strategies. ASHRAE F.10.9 source controls. It seems common sense, but good housekeeping, not keeping a messy project, not having the project, with contaminated buckets of whatever sitting around, contaminated with, and like you had said earlier, the sanding dust, drywall dust, HVAC maintenance and operations. I can't tell you how many buildings in my 40 years, and you've probably been in, and you're like, wow, we're going to do construction in here on top of how poorly this place was maintained and operated. We can make our mess. It wouldn't even be noticed.
Well, filtration during the project. How many jobs have you been on where the units are being used for temporary heat and cool?
Exactly. So
what happens with your coils and everything? And anyway, where I'm going at.
And they get down, and then it gets down to where local exhaust ventilation, dilution ventilation, disinfection procedures, space pressure control, filtration, and moisture control. I know disinfectant procedures were very, very abundant. We were all going into buildings over COVID. First thing you had to do was get these paws cleaned off. You couldn't walk in the building with any of this stuff dirty. You had to put your hand sanitizer on. Well, that wasn't the only thing that should be sanitized or disinfected. So,
well, I think we'll come to it in a moment, but and we may want to go to the next slide. I don't know, but your startup and final acceptance. What's used during the cleanup process is important.
Yes.
Just the cleaning it, the SVOCs or semi-volatile organic compounds can cause issues too. I think I told the story at the CX Energy about our choir. We had a lady who enjoyed her perfume, let's say, and it got to be where she would come in and everybody's nose would clog up and everybody get hoarse and what have you. And that's an SVOC that you don't think about. And others are, your cleaning compounds.
I used to get it. I think I said this. I may have said this at CX Energy, but when I was a kid, Sunday morning going to church with my grandparents, I knew getting in that old Ford LTD, and the windows half rolled up, I was going to smell that my grandmother's perfume, and I knew at the age of 6, 7, 8, I was going to get a headache right away. Immediately.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But anyway, during our startup and final acceptance, roll back one there, please.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
There you go.
One more back. We got to go back one. There you go. Of course, test. That's all right. Test and balance is what I'm trying to get to there. There you go. Good job. But test and balance, of course, we need to do our jobs right. And in doing so, we make sure that the job is done properly. We go through the controls verification. And of course, the functional testing or functional performance testing by the commissioning agency just backs up what we do. It's important for the tab company and the commissioning agency to work together. I know sometimes I've been on projects where the commissioning authority and tab seem to be at loggerheads with one another.
Yes.
And that's not the way it needs to be. It needs to be that we work together for the final proper operation of the building, safety of the people inside, and make sure that everything is done properly, point-to-point checks made, make sure the outside air controls properly, pressurization is proper, so that, again, those folks who are going to be working in there most of their days and exposed to it, the exposure is minimized and they're safe. Building flush, I've run into this many times with the federal government, particularly. They require building flush take place before it can ever be occupied. But many times on the outside in the public sector, buildings are not flushed, and they're actually pushing you at the end of the project to try to get in there and put in the furniture and put in everything and occupy the space. And that's understandable. Of course, it's understandable because that's how they make the money. But nonetheless, I think we need to make them aware of what has to take place. And then over time, it needs to be gone back and checked. I don't know what that period is. Do you know, Mike, whether it's every year, every 3 years or what have you, that it should be verified?
I don't know what the requirements are, but I do know that we have a local company. I don't want to say their name out loud, but when they build a building, they'll actually do building flush for hours, off hours. And I mean, for hours, like maybe 4 or 5 hours at a time, they'll flush that building when no one's there, helping to mitigate and as the weeks and days and maybe a year goes on with the new building, that new car smell, new building smell goes away. And they know that this is affecting, they've read and they understand. They don't want that absenteeism. They don't want those complaints. This is a brand new building they just invested in. It smells great, but I feel terrible in it. Like the EPA story I told earlier. It's one of those things where they understand and they know post-occupancy and final occupancy, this is what we're going to do down the road. We're not going to purge this in 6 weeks and get rid of it. Like everybody thinks we're going to purge it and we're going to flush the building and we'll be good. We flushed it for 4 weeks. We're good. Or so many thousand cubic feet per minute. And we're going to run it 7 hours a day for, 3 weeks and that'll flush the building. It'll be good. It all depends on how long that VOC is in there and whatever other contaminants there are. Of course, when you have people entering a building, you add contaminants to it. So it's
Exactly.
but I don't know how many times you should flush the building or go back for testing post occupancy. Next.
Yep.
Post occupancy, possibly a subject for another presentation. No space can be designed where sickness is not shared. However, the actions we take before the building is occupied will help to minimize the probability of lost time and intercompany sharing of illnesses and prepare the spaces for safer occupancy. Exactly what we just talked about in the previous slide was helping to minimize all the probability of people not showing up, complaints. We want it to be a happy, safe, and healthy new building or renovated building.
And there's a list of what I was referring to as
yes.
the semi-volatile compounds that we come in contact with, even at home. And that's just a list there. It amazed me when I started looking at this and finding out things that were actually harmful that we expose ourselves to on a daily basis voluntarily. And
yeah. And again, for some of us, the Shalimar number 5, my grandmother wore perfume. He was great selling to my grandfather. He loved it. That's why she wore it. But for me, I wanted to vomit. I was like, oh my God, that's the worst stuff in the world. But, again, shampoos, electronic equipment, I'm a big I love walking through Costco and going through the tire department because I love the smell of new car tires, you know, and that's just me. Some people think that's a horrid smell, and I get it, but you know, probably not a good thing to be in the tire department 8 hours a day smelling that every day. If you're hypersensitive to something, or even not, you're just one of those people that it could definitely be harmful. So with that, Joe, thank you very much. I appreciate you putting this together and making sure this webinar went well. And I enjoy sharing time with you giving a presentation like this. So thank you. Can everyone hear me?
I can hear you fine.
Okay.
I
I don't know if we have any questions from
don't
the,
either.
We haven't had any come in, so if you have questions in the audience, please put them in the Q&A now. We'd love to hear your questions for the panelists.
so I guess if anybody's going to post something in the meantime, I will conclude with this. If you ever have an instance and you're in an AABC situation or ACG situation or an EMA situation or project or entity, and you know of a webinar or a topic or an idea, don't be afraid at all to reach out to any one of those 3 associations and say, hey, I have an idea for this. I'm not a good speaker, but I think this would be a good topic, or to expand on this topic we talked about today. Please let us know. Drop me, Joe, or any of the fine people at the management company that control AABC, ACG, or EMA, and they will we'll do what we can. And then if you have any questions post, please do reach out. Other than that, Joe, do you have anything else?
No. I just, again, I would like to see the commissioning agents and TAB personnel work closer together. And I would love to see the engineers and architects and owners get us involved a lot sooner in the projects.
Yes, I would have to say exactly on that, ditto. So we don't have any. Yeah. Thank you, Casey.
Yeah, that's a wrap for today's webinar. Thank you, Mike and Joe, for a great presentation and discussion. And thank you again to our sponsor, CX Planner. Last but not least, thank you to everyone who joined us today for the webinar. Before we wrap everything up, I want to remind everyone who hasn't already to save the date for the AABC annual meeting coming up in October. It'll be October 9th through 11th in Lost Pines, Texas. There's information on the screen, and you can visit aabc.com for further details on that. And I think that's all until our next webinar. Stay well, and thank you all so much for your time.